The session this afternoon is really looking at food and agriculture through the lens of government policy with a specific focus on innovation. And if we talk about the state globally of food production, we face a difficult situation. The dual challenges of COVID and the Ukraine war have exposed the fragility of our food systems. That fragility has existed and was first evidenced back in 2009. The challenges of our food systems have resulted in new relationships being formed between suppliers. They have resulted in disrupted supply chains, a working capital crisis for farmers all around the world based on rapidly increasing input costs. And in the context of all of that, we equally face the challenge of climate change, which is being felt on a day-to-day basis, but nevertheless is requiring that we adapt. Fundamentally, the question that the panel faces today is how do we adapt? What role does innovation play? And what can governments do at a policy level in order to support innovation to create that adaptive capacity? Danielle, Israel is perhaps the prime example of adaptation and innovation in agriculture. Its conditions are tough, its soils are tough, and against all odds, it has become a global leader in agriculture, in agricultural-based technologies, and its innovations have spurred agricultural development in many countries, particularly in Africa. I've worked with many Israeli technology suppliers over the years myself. The question I have for you, what role did government have to play in this innovative approach? And specifically, what policies have assisted in achieving the results that Israel has?
Thanks, Grant. Is this on? Yeah, great. Okay, so this is one of my favorite questions you'll hear, but I'd like to start by just seeing a show of hands. I know we've got a difficult spot right after lunch when everyone's maybe tired and eaten too much. So I just wanted to ask and see in the audience, how many of you have visited Israel before? Okay, so the majority of you haven't. That's excellent. So the guys that you have visited, I want you to back me up and Grant up when we tell the others who have yet to see our agriculture coming out of the desert that Israel is a crazy place to do agriculture. Okay, it makes no sense. Really, when we say it's a miracle, it's really not far short. It's a tiny country, which means we don't have a lot of land. It's 2/3 desert. There's a shortage of water resources, and geographically we normally say we're situated in a difficult neighborhood, which means our export markets are just that much further afield. So how on earth did Israel not only realize food security, but position agriculture as a key driver of economic growth, and then emerge, as Grant said, as this global leader in agriculture and water? And we often used to get asked that question all the time, like, this makes no sense. How did you do it? Okay, and so I actually approached Grant's organization, the Tony Blair Institute, and AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution Africa. And I said to them, the answers people are giving, it's because of the kibbutz. Do you know what the kibbutz is? Yes? The kibbutz is, the cooperative, socialist / nearly communist model where sometimes they even shared their underwear and not just their farming equipment. And sometimes they said, oh, it's because of drip irrigation, that's why I succeeded. And I said, actually, I don't think that's the answer. And so together, we actually wrote a case study. The Honorable Tony Blair actually wrote the foreword. It's titled, How Israel Became a World Leader in Agriculture and Water, and Insights for Nations Today. And I can tell you that the foundation of the key driver from Israel was the government policy and approach. There are a lot of policies that Israel implemented, but the one I wanted to highlight for you today, could you hold my microphone? Thank you. It's something we call the golden triangle, okay? It's this. This is why you need my microphone. This is one of the key secrets to Israel's agricultural success. What the government of Israel did is it invested very heavily in Israel's agricultural innovation ecosystem, the triangle, okay? At the top, this point bit here, is the research and development. Israel poured money into the development of the scientists and enabled them to do research. Over here in the bottom right-hand corner is the extension service. For those who are not in the ag field, extension are the agronomists. If you tomorrow pick up and say, I want to become a chicken farmer, you've no idea about chickens, right? You go to your extension officer. They're the ones that teach you everything you need to know about chickens. Okay? So the extension service. Israel poured money into the establishment of a brilliant extension service. And over here is the private sector, which is critical, as we know, because agriculture must be treated as a business. We're not just growing for food security to eat, we're growing because agriculture is a business. Now, what is in the middle of this triangle, and this is the most important part, is the farmer. I feel so often we're talking about food security, but most overlooked are sometimes the farmers. So you've got the R&D, extension, and the private sector, and the farmer is in the middle. Now, what you can't see, thank you very much. Oh, you can? Yeah. Now, what you can't see on that triangle, which is critical, and I don't know how much the government is responsible, Grant, is the fact that there is no hierarchy here in Israel. Most of you haven't visited, and you've only been here a few days. But Israelis have no respect for authority whatsoever. This is why we call our prime minister. This is why we call our prime minister by his nickname. This is why we're not afraid to share our ideas. And what that means, which is not very common in many countries, definitely across Africa, and I'm not as familiar with the Gulf, is that this farmer in the middle has no qualms whatsoever about picking up the telephone and calling the top professor in the country and saying, listen, Yoram, I have an issue with my tomato. Can you come and check it out? And he will say yes. Because the actors in this golden triangle are all interacting, and the government has a critical role to play in enabling that. And I don't want to keep talking because I know there's other panelists, but there's a short story I can give. But, yeah? All right, I want to make this tangible for you, okay? Because sometimes it's very theoretical and it feels like a geometry class because we're talking triangles. Okay. In the north of Israel, there was a group of farmers who identified an opportunity in the basil market. You all know what basil is? On the pizza, basilicum, yofi. The issue was, for these farmers, is that the basil market in Europe, they had to grow it in the winter, and it was too cold in the north of Israel. So they went to the innovation ecosystem, this triangle, okay? And they said to the scientists, to the extension officers, this is what we want to do. Can you help us? What we need to do is to raise the temperature in our growing environment in the basil, but without using energy, because then it's too expensive. Can you come up with a solution? So the innovation ecosystem went into overdrive, and they start brainstorming with the farmers. And they came up with a crazy idea, which is to fill plastic polythene bags with water. And they laid them down, literally, between the rows of the crops. And during the day, the water absorbed the heat from the sun. And so when the temperature dropped at night, it started emitting the heat, raising the temperature of the environment. It wasn't quite enough, so they decided to build a fence with the plastic polythene bags. And they got excited. They called the farmers. Listen, you guys, we found the solution. You have to come and check it out. And they're like, are you crazy? That would never work. So in true Israeli innovation style, they invited the farmers in the middle of the night to come and see the basil growing. They gave them infrared goggles so they could see the temperature. And lo and behold, these plastic walls of water was raising the temperature. And now we have a thriving basil market in the north of Israel. And I think this is just one of many examples we've got that actually demonstrate the role that government played in enabling the innovation ecosystem and how critically it works with an entrepreneurial mindset and engaging the farmer. Thanks.
Thank you, Danielle. Febbie, you have a personal mission to uplift smallholder farmers in Malawi. And a key part of that is bringing sustainable technologies to play. Do you enjoy the same level of support that Danielle has just described from government? And if not, where do you see opportunities for governments in Africa to learn from the Israeli model?
Thank you. Thank you so much. As I've already been introduced, I'm a farmer. By profession, I'm an engineer. I did electrical engineering, but I'm applying the skills into farming. And first of all, let me thank the organizers of the event for giving me such a great opportunity. Thank you so much, JCPA. And then let me also extend my gratitude to Meirav. I'm a co-owner of Caris Invest and Consult. Actually, we were supported with a grant by them, and they also gave us expertise. So we are so grateful because that was the genesis of the journey. Let me also extend my gratitude to Volcani International Institute for supporting us with expertise. Okay, first of all, I'm a youth image model for youth employment in agribusiness. So as such, there is a very big platform for transformation in the agriculture sector. And apart from that, we are using the Israeli technology to train local farmers surrounding the community. There's always been a gap between the elite and farmers in the rural areas. And yet, the people who can also transform Malawi's economy are those smallholder farmers. So when we saw a gap there, we started now using Israeli expertise and technologies to train the farmers in the rural areas to increase their productivity and in order to take farming as a viable business. And I can say here that, yes, we are working with the government of Malawi, but it has not been there for us because even the trainings we are offering the farmers, we use our own resources in order to go and train the farmers because we won't change. We can't keep on talking about food and water insecurity and yet we are just folding our hands. No. So we have begun. And the government is not yet supporting us. It's actually the government of Israel which is coming in. And we are trying now to involve the government for the project to be scaled up. Because maybe if you don't know, we also experienced Cyclone Febbie. And out of 28 villages, 28 districts in Malawi, 12 have been affected, meaning that these 12 districts will be food insecure. And it needs the government to support those smallholder farmers in order to make sure that there is food security. But the government is not doing enough to support people or initiatives which can lead to food and water security. And what I think the government can do is, first of all, to support innovations with high impact in food and water security. And this can be done by maybe building excellent centers for excellence and innovation hubs, where all these innovations can be supported technically and financially in order to be adapted and implemented. That's the first thing. And the second thing can be actually attaching these innovations to sectors in agriculture. There are different innovations, but if the government can take specifically those innovations with high impact in food and water security and make sure that these innovations are integrated into the agriculture sector, it means food insecurity will not be an issue.
Febbie, many governments in Africa see agriculture as the way to create employment for our very broad-based population. Are you finding interest from the youth in engaging with agriculture?
Yes, actually, I'm so passionate about this. As I told you that I left the engineering role and ventured into farming. So farming is an easy way because in Malawi we have plenty of resources. For example, we have 13 rivers and 3 lakes with fresh water. And those waters are underutilized. So when I'm training the youth in agriculture, they have land, they have water. So they have their capital there because when we talk of mechanization, that's the issue for another day. because we're not yet there. we are going there, and hopefully we'll be there. But the youth, for a start, can start with them being the capital now. They can be doing the actual work on the farm. And at times we do give them seeds, and we connect them to organizations that can assist them in the same. And that's why we are conducting webinars with Volcani Institute in order to improve in order to change the mindset of the youth in the way they perceive agriculture. The youth need to perceive agriculture as an important business, a vital business, and agriculture actually pays. So if we are talking about food, everyone here was there eating. We can't live without food. So it's a viable business. It doesn't like markets. And it's important for the youth to venture into agribusiness.
Thank you, Febbie. If I can... Kofi, if I could move to you. You have the difficult role of making small businesses profitable. You support entrepreneurs, you advise them. My question is really one of what can governments do at a policy level to try and level the playing field for entrepreneurs that are involved in the SME sector?
Well, we have a view that what's more important for government to do is to get out of the way. And it's not just ideology, because, again, like she said, we have a lot of youth in Ghana, and the opportunity is there for you to see, literally. I mean, we are opposite Israel. So if you take Ghana, for instance, Ghana has one of the largest man-made lakes in the world, the Volta Lake. And it literally flows from the north through Ghana and goes into the sea in the south with very good fresh water. And we are cut across by rivers. Every place in Ghana is arable land. You can grow crops on the highest mountain in Ghana. 12 months a year, you can farm every day. I told somebody sometime, if you live in a walled house, you can go naked for the whole year in Ghana. The weather is that good. You know, and so you don't understand why. And even with all the agriculture that goes on in Ghana, only 30% of arable land has been farmed in Ghana. If you go to the northern parts of Ghana, which is about half of Ghana, it's amazingly beautiful flat land that goes on forever and nobody farms it. The thing about Ghanaians is that we are very relaxed and we like it that way. The satisfaction threshold for the average Ghanaian is pretty low. It's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because we've never had a civil war in Ghana. A Ghanaian will bend backwards and take it and not bother much. You can push him as far as he'll go and he'll just walk away. And because of that, things are not too difficult in Ghana. But the other side is that he will farm just what he needs to eat. And once he's okay and his neighbors are okay, that's okay. All right? But things are changing because you have these young people who want to go into agribusiness and all the other things. Then they keep hitting government. They keep hitting all kinds of regulations. They keep recently, just last year, one of the biggest problems in farming was fertilizer. When you didn't have government subsidies in fertilizer, you had abundant fertilizer and it was well distributed. Now the government says, I'm going to subsidize fertilizer because I want everybody to have fertilizer. Then they intervene in the fertilizer market. It kills the market. And then the government is the one that brings in the fertilizer and they smuggle the fertilizer. People who need the fertilizer don't get it. Except you are buying black market fertilizer and it creates problems for you. And I could go on and on and on and on. My point is, if the average Ghanaian did not have to deal with seeds and government regulations around it and all those other things, and many people, especially in the villages, who don't have to deal with these things, they just go into farming and they farm, and a lot of times with a little technology here and there. If you take mangoes, for instance, the normal yield was multiplied by about 100 times just by introducing some technology and people combining with other people. One of the things I hope we can do from here is for Israelis to come to Ghana and farm. You can get 100 times more what you are getting here. Okay, and I'll be your champion to get rid of the government out of your way. So if you ask me what should government do, I will say, look, appreciate that there is a certain natural tendency for people to want to do something for themselves. And yes, you might want to help them, but just leave them alone for now. And then find where they actually have a problem. Markets, roads, okay? The business of farming, that's a problem. And everything grows in Ghana. Flowers. There was a business plan I looked at where people were going to grow flowers and fly them out of Ghana, and it was perfectly viable because we are on the equator. In 9 hours, you'll be in the UK. Everything. And then you start hitting the problem. You have to register your business. You have to do this and you have to do, and that is the problem. So get out of the way. Maybe that's a good start.
Kofi, before you put the mic down, referring back to the Israeli model, research is something which is evidently key to lead innovation. Does government not have a role to play in the field of research?
Yes, they do. And we have quite a number of research institutions in Ghana for agriculture. My disappointment with them is that I think they should make it more locally relevant. And we even have the extension officers, but somehow it doesn't hit the ground, right? I spent a bit of time in farming in my youth because my uncle had a farm. My uncle was a banker who wanted to farm. And for the 10 years or so that we farmed, we did not see any influence of the research institutions in Ghana on our farming. So again, there's a lot of money spent in that area, but it's just not properly targeted. Now, if you put me in research, put me in charge of research in farming for Ghana, I would put half of the people there to be actual farmers. And I want people who are engaged in farming to determine how research funding for farming or agriculture is spent. All right? I think it's the other way around this time. The people who are involved there are policy people and academics and whatever. And I think there's a bit of disconnect between they and the farmers. So I would say there's a role there. But the role is not just to spend money in research. It is to make research relevant to people in Ghana. And I believe if that's done, there'll be a positive difference.
Fantastic, thank you. Perhaps a good opportunity to turn to you, Eran, and ask on the issue of applied research, which Kofi has just talked about. What has Israel done to get that so right? And number one. And number two, does it have application beyond Israel into countries in, for example, Africa?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. First of all, I'm sharing the same philosophy that the best thing that governments can do is not to disturb. That's the first principle, because governments has the tendency to be usually to disturb innovation, to disturb with not necessary bureaucracy. But after I said that, at least in Israel, today the government support 8 R&D, agricultural R&D. Tomorrow you will visit the one that we have in our region, and you will see, I think, probably the most advanced agriculture that's been done in the world in desert agriculture. And the way that the system works is that the Ministry of Agriculture is supporting, subsidizing R&D together with another agency. It's called the KKL, Kakal in Israel, and they are giving the seed money to conduct those researchers that eventually will be implemented by the farmers. I can tell you for many years, and I've been in many places all over the world, always the farmers thinks that the researchers are not efficient. It's also in Israel. But when you check again the market and what we added into the market in terms of if it's new crops or new things that are more sustainable and can deal with the different viruses that we can have or we add. I think we had a crucial contribution to the research and the implemental research. And I can give a few examples, but tomorrow you will see it with your own eyes. With your eyes, and you will taste it. By the way, the best food that you can imagine. The most tasteful cherry tomatoes, pineapples, strawberry, cherries. Basically, we know to do everything in this desert. And I think one thing that we need to understand, first of all, the farming in Israel was strongly connected with the ideology. You cannot disconnect it, because in the times where the farming was not too profitable, always the government needed to subsidize if it's with the water or with different incentives. And there are incentives to the farmers, there are incentives, the government does subsidize the water, but in terms of the search and the R&D, I think we got to the stage, and only in the past 5 years, that we understood that we need to go one layer above, which is the technology. Most of the R&D in Israel were focusing on, as I said, the different crops, different variety, maybe to do it more efficient with better yield. But now we got to the point of the technology, because Israel is a startup nation. At least that's the reputation. And we now see that there is a big demand for the knowledge that we produced about Israel desert farming, and to connect it with the technology. What kind of technology? It can be optics, it can be remote sensing, it can be sugar testing, it can be in many, many fields. And once you do this integration between the technology, the startups, the high-tech, those very dynamic industry with the farming or the agriculture industry, interesting things happen. But you need to take in consideration, and maybe this is, again, one of the basic rules, you need to expect to fail. Without failing, there won't be any success. And now we are developing desert truffles. And if it will work, and I think it will work, it will be something outstanding, and many of our farmers will make good money out of it. But it will take us another 2 or 3 years to develop it. And then, on the way, we assume that there will be things that we won't succeed. So, first of all, you need to initiate, to think out of the box, and making farming in the desert is thinking out of the box. And and it was said before me, Ben-Gurion lived and passed away in our district, thinking about the potential of the desert. And now we see it with the climate changes, with the connection with other countries, and we definitely working with countries in Africa. We're working with countries in the Far East, and basically almost over the world. And I'll just finish with this short story that 2 months ago I had a visitor from Vietnam, the mayor of Ho Chi Minh City. It used to be known as Saigon. He came to me with like 20 people that accompanied him, and I asked him, how many people do you have, mayor, in Ho Chi Minh City? He said, we just a little bit above 10 million people. I said to him, we are a little bit below 10,000 people, but we know how to feed those 10 million people. Actually, we know to feed our 100 million people, and now with the Egyptians and many other countries as well, with the United Arab Emirates, we're exporting our knowledge in order to feed many of the people that need to be fed in this world. Thank you.
Thank you, Eran. Richard, over to you. The Brenthurst Foundation advises governments across Africa on policies that promote economic development. What sort of challenges do you face in getting policies adopted by governments that are supportive of free trade, and developmental outcomes.
Last on the stage and last to speak. Before I jump into that, I just want to sort of echo what's been said already. I was just writing down on my phone, taking a note that, in order to be successful, you have to be scared to fail. I think governments are inherently risk averse. They don't want to fail because they know they'll suffer come the next election. That's probably the biggest concern. I share the opinion that, yes, governments should get out the way. Government should not be in the business of doing business. So that's, I think, a key takeaway. And unfortunately, what we've seen in Africa is too often governments getting a bit too comfortable with doing business. And that's very perplexing. I was talking to Febbie before lunch about ADMARC in Malawi, the Agricultural Development and Marketing Corporation, and just how that sort of existed to set a floor and ceiling price on maize, but somehow found itself owning a football team in Malawi. Just one of many examples. I'm sure the cocoa board in Ghana as well, Kofi. We can go on and on. And in my home country of South Africa, we're very good when it comes to state-owned enterprises and running them into the ground. I think to answer the question, the biggest challenge that we've seen when we've sat down with governments and heads of state is, and it lends itself to what I've just said, is that governments, they want to control as much as possible. And that's ideological as it is economic, right? If we look back at when governments gained independence, during and at the end of the Cold War, there's been a very strong state-centric mentality in African governments. And just two of the examples I mentioned now, in Ghana and Malawi, there is the focus on we know best, we will deliver for our people, and we can make a bit of money whilst we do it as well. There is not always a distrust, but there certainly is a uncertainty around the private sector in many countries. Again, South Africa being one of them. We are notorious for not wanting to work with the private sector. And so it's about trying to break down those barriers. And in my experience, the best way you can do that is seeing is believing, right? We've all heard about Israel and the success it's had in agriculture. I know many people here have come to Israel to see. I've been to Ramat HaNegev. I've met with Lion David, and seen firsthand, the success. And really, it's about doing that, and it's about, more importantly, actually giving local ownership to the African stakeholders. There is a thing known as neocolonialism, the idea that, in Africa, things still need to be provided for Africans. They need to be shown, they need to be taught, they need to be essentially managed by a Westerner, by a Mzungu, such as myself. So really, if you want to enjoy buy-in at the highest level, it's about actually getting local ownership. Because again, you have to think about this, and perhaps this is somewhat pessimistic, but you have to think from the government's perspective. They want to stay in power. If they want to stay in power, they need the electorate to support them. The best way they can get the electorate to support them is for the government to be seen as doing good by the people. And so if they can get foreigners such as Israel to come in and actually not just hand over the technology or train them and have maybe a weekend seminar, but actually give them the tools. You can give a man a fish, but if you teach a man to fish, you feed him for life. And this really goes back to the origins of Israel's endeavors on the African continent. The first embassy was opened in Ghana back in 1956-57, Golda Meir. The idea that Israeli agronomers were lauded for their ability to roll up their sleeves and actually work in the fields with the local African counterparts, whereas the Brits and the Americans wanted to have tea and coffee and lunch. So Israel, for the most part, has enjoyed that benefit. And, I've seen it in countries like Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia, where there are Israelis, working in the fields. They've been living out there. They've been training locals. And they really do have a lot to give and a lot to offer. The question is, how do you then get that to a higher level into policy? And that's where we certainly try and bridge the divide and bridge the gap. But ultimately, it does come down to a question of how do you tie something like this, or a particular policy, to government benefit? And in many cases, that's difficult. Sadly, in South Africa, our government doesn't want really anything to do with Israel. We've recently just downgraded the embassy here to a liaison office. Having said that, Innovation Africa, that operate out of Tel Aviv, their largest presence in Africa is ironically in South Africa. So it just goes to show that just because the government says one thing, it doesn't mean that the benefits aren't being felt at a grassroots level, and that everyday folk don't actually stand to gain. So really it is about, if Danielle mentioned a triangle, I'm going to mention a Venn diagram. It's about trying to get all the right stakeholders to amass or to coalesce around a central point, and to actually move them forward by showing them just what is possible.
Thank you, Richard. I'm going to kick off the first question for the panel, not to any of you specifically, but I want to get back to our theme of innovation. And my question is really one of, what does the future of food look like to you? At the moment, we have some quite polarized views in terms of, number one, a return to very environmentally sound agriculture, the agroecological approach. And on the other hand, we have a very industrial approach, which is, let's say, looking at new technologies, or not such new technologies, but things like precision fermentation, where we actually have industrial manufacturing operations that will provide the future of the food that we eat. So really, from your personal perspectives, what does the future of food look like?
I instinctively picked up the microphone, so I think I'll start. For context, I'm not a scientist or an agronomist. I'm a politician by training, ashamedly. But I think the key future for food, specifically in Africa, is going to come down to urban farming. I think and someone mentioned earlier, Africa's population, by 2050, you're looking at 2.2, 2.3 billion people. About 1.5 billion will live in urban centers. Urban centers which we know today, Lagos, Dar es Salaam, Johannesburg, but completely new ones. And I think when we talk about farming and agriculture in Africa, we automatically think about the smallholder in rural Africa. But what we are perhaps forgetting is that many of these rural farmers, or at least their children, will move to urban centers. And as we know, urban centers are already scarce when it comes to space. If you've visited Lagos, for example, you will know firsthand. So the question becomes, how do you feed the millions and billions of people that will be living in these urban centers if you're already struggling in terms of logistics to get food from the rural areas to the metropoles to begin with? So really, we need to start, in my opinion, when we talk about the future of food, is we need to start thinking about how do we, yes, incorporate new systems and technologies when it comes to agriculture, but how do we do it whilst being cognizant of the fact that much of the farming that's going to happen in the future will be in very dense spaces where real estate really is at a premium, and perhaps the access to resources won't be what we understand them to be today.
Thanks, Richard. So basically an intensification which allows food to be produced closer to market. Eran, your view.
Sorry.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm not sure how popular this is, but I am quite convinced that the future of agriculture is agribusiness. I think many more people are going to move to urban areas, and you are going to have more specialization in farming. You are going to have more innovation in farming. I think you are going to have more scientific farming, and you're going to have the situation where it happens somewhere and there's a supply chain, it is shipped somewhere and it's consumed. Now, in Africa, or if you take just Ghana, we can produce everything we need in Ghana, but it won't make sense. It won't make sense because the future of agriculture is agribusiness. Economics will drive this thing, right? If you have a situation where we realize our dreams in ECOWAS, for instance, and if we have a situation which is my dream that we get the kind of connection we need with countries like Israel, okay, we are having interest from as far off as China. People are buying huge lands and producing things we don't need in Ghana and just exporting it because it just makes economic sense. If we have that arrangement, you can have what people need in Lagos grown in Ghana and shipped across. And then you can have Israeli farmers come to Ghana and take a quarter of the northern region because it's cheap to make a lot of money farming over there. You just need to see it. And grow wheat and export it to, Israel. So for me, I think the future of agriculture is agribusiness. I don't know why people have a certain resistance to that. Yes, COVID saw the disruption of, supply chains, etc. We will look back at COVID in the next 20 years and call it a blessing. Mark these words. We will call it a blessing because COVID basically shifted us 20 years ahead. We use Zoom today, all right? And COVID just taught us that our supply chains are not as resilient as they should be in this age. So the way I see it is that, look, if all this opportunity is there and Chinese are coming into Africa, buying lands and growing crops and shipping it back to China, we are going to see that the economics drives the agriculture. And the innovation makes it like that fewer people will be needed there. You send the machines over, they produce the crops, etc. So agribusiness will be more and more and more important. Yes, we'll still have agriculture, but really, I think the future will look more like what you have here in Israel and somewhere in the West.
Excellent. Eran, over to you.
Theoretically, there's supposed to be a very good business because there will be more people, the demand will be bigger, right? But on the other end, we know the shortage of water and the lack of land, fertile land, will be making a dangerous situation. So first of all, we need to deal with the climate changes and then see what will be the outcomes. My optimism is about two things, is that first of all, the growth of demographic growth will produce a lot of sewage. In Israel, we use between 70 to 80% of the water, of the sewage, we use it back to recycling into the farming. So theoretically, as many as people will go to the urban places, there will be more sewage. With this sewage, we'll be able to irrigate the crops. So this is one thing. The second thing is that we need to improve much better the synergy between the waste and the waste of water. So the waste of farming waste and all the waste that we are assimilating, if there will be the technology will know how to handle. And unfortunately, in this thing, Israel is behind other countries. But eventually, that's what we need to do: to take the waste, to take the sewage, and create a new farming that will be feeding the world population. And it can happen, and it should be. And of course, after I said that, maybe the main focus will be on the aquatech, which will be on water in the oceans, and of course all the replacement for meat and for dairy products. So there is so many options, so many opportunities. We just need to focus on solving those things that we produce as problems, sewage, waste, and I think we'll be able to live to our kinder kids, our children, a better place, hopefully. But optimism and pessimism, it's just a matter of experience.
Febbie, in this high-tech future for agriculture, do you think that smallholder farmers have a role?
Actually, okay, I'm divided. If you want to play around with government policies, food will be expensive because we are talking of using technology, digitizing processes. We are talking of using ICT. We are talking of mechanizing everything. But these things comes with a cost. They are not for free. So if food is agribusiness, it means the one who is producing the food needs to get profit out of it. And if we are not careful enough, if we are not working around with government policies, smallholder farmers will be casualties. Thank you.
I'm not sure where the future of food is going. I'm not sure if we hold this conference in 10 years, we'll all have just feasted on, a plant-based burger or, replacement milk. I do hope the future of food will be agribusiness. But after a trip to the US last week, I just had several engagements with the US government, and I think the key driver or determinant of where our food systems are going to be going will be based on where we decide to invest. And I say we, I really mean governments, and the big DFIs and the big money players here, and the kind of infrastructure we're deciding to invest in. I heard a lot in the US about investing in, the roads and the markets and the enabling ecosystem. I think coming from Israel's experience, not only that is critical, but as we always discuss, Grant, the investment needs to go into the knowledge as well, the capacity for the people. And I think that's a key government role to determine the future of food systems with the R&D and the extension. But also, as Febbie said, they have to be investing in training the farmers. And I hope they're the ones that will actually be leading this agribusiness revolution.
So just a quick thing. So assuming that a farmer in Israel who has to deal with every problem, water, land, this, and he's thinking about, repurposing sewage and using it in farming, etc. Assuming that farmer travels to meet me in Accra and we go on a trip to the north, and he realizes, and I bet you it's true, that he needs just 1/10 of the investment and just 1/10 of the effort, all right, to produce twice what he's producing in Israel. You will learn very quickly that unless there's a government in his way, he's going to move his farming to Ghana, and he's going to produce those crops there and ship it to Israel. I think that's going to happen more and more. My problem is governments. And if we can make those links happen, we will realize quickly, and I'm so sorry to say this, but it's true, that traditional farmers who farm as a way of life will be the first casualty. You would have to make farming a business and a serious business. And again, sorry to say, but if they don't find a way to connect with economics and investors in food and agribusiness, they will be pushed away. But any country that trades efficiently never faces a famine. If you trade, if you don't have too many, barriers to trade, you will never have a famine. We're having a situation in Ghana today where, the economy is in trouble and we're going to the IMF and all those things. And I've lived long enough to remember the last time we had a situation like that, which led us into a very terrible coup, and a soldier took over for 19 years. The difference between now and then is that at that time we had shortages. You had to queue for everything, toilet roll, food, everything, and it erupted. Now the problems are worse, but there is no shortage. Petrol prices went up, food prices went up, everything went up. Everybody screamed and shouted and insulted everybody, and then we went back to our lives. So as long as you don't have those shortages, which trade would deal with? And as part of trade, you realize, like I'm saying, instead of farming at a certain price here or anywhere for that matter, if you can do it in Ghana for 1/10 of the price and twice the output, you are going to have to move to Ghana. So that's the future I can see, and I hope it happens quickly because really it's going to be better for everybody.
Fantastic. Can we open it up to the floor? A couple of questions.
Is it working? Hello? Okay. My name is Eric Schmid. I'm kind of a hybrid of a new immigrant to this country and one foot in Africa. I lived in Africa for 35 years. I'm an agronomist. I was a farmer myself in the Cape. You come from Cape Town. A few maybe remarks, maybe to help also in the discussion and to move forward. I work for an organization here with Dan called Israel for Africa. And what we do is, or let me do one step back. We found from the data here in Jerusalem from the Chamber of Chambers that 2% of the GDP of Israel comes from Africa. Despite all the good work what's been doing already, so there's a huge market for Israel to go still to Africa. That's one remark, what strikes me. I worked with many Israelis in Africa and do fantastic work technically. I think there might be a need, and the panel maybe can confirm this, that I've seen many turnkey projects, and they do fantastic work with irrigation, but there is always a link. Sometimes when it's finished. There's no continuation. So I spoke with you over lunchtime, and you confirmed that training of training is important. So if I can plant a seed in our Israeli brothers and sisters here who want to strengthen the linkages, come to us, Israel for Africa, and we link you with opportunities in Africa with our brothers and sisters here to avoid this gap. I've seen it with USAID. I've seen it with many organizations. They do the same. After a few years, the whole thing collapses. And if you talk about food security, you have to give our people in Africa the opportunity to continue. It might not be going as we Westerners, and I speak for myself as well, want it, but let it flow. And it's, I say, always in the hands of the good Lord to make it happen eventually. I also have a question, maybe in the discussion we can now after this to Israeli companies here and representatives. Why do you do what you do? Yeah, it might be interesting to have a super interesting, good system, irrigation system, but is that what people want? I would rather suggest let the dialogue come from Africa to us here in Israel, and I'm sure Volcano is doing this already and on a high scale, to identify what's needed. For instance, you do work here in Israel about sweet potato. Till I went to Rami Levy, the big supermarket is that, and they sell yellow sweet potatoes, which is high in vitamin A. Excellent. So maybe the technology you do here, I don't know if Volcano is doing this, but inject it more with international institutions in Africa. Achla, fantastic. Thank you. And you're welcome to come to me and Dan after the conversation.
Excellent, thank you. Long-term engagement, I think, is what it's all about. Agriculture is exactly that. Was there a question over there?
Yes.
In Africa, and lack of, the climate change and lack of water, and there is also lack of government investment. The government is not investing enough in terms of technology, in terms of water catchment.
We are wasting too much water annually, and people are still, the country is still dry, and a lot of deforestation, and the environmental is not protected by government. And unlike my friend over there, I think the government should step in to actually, and I like the Israeli model, the triangle, which in our panel actually suggested. The government needs to step in and invest more into water technology, water catchment, in building dams, that kind of things. And above all, we need more market access. Because if our farmers produce, and we cannot access international mainstream markets, there is no point farming it. So most of our farmers are actually don't have appetite because there is no market accessibility internationally. So that's actually putting most of our farmers back because they produce, they're not making any money. The other thing we have in Africa is we are not trading each other. And, we are not exporting, importing each other. We're not buying from each other. Somaliland, Richard been there. We buy more from Ethiopia in agricultural product annually than any other African country. And so we need more integration economically in Africa. And we need more in terms of integrating our farming into the world. Because most of our farmers, it's not because we have got more land. In Somaliland is bigger than Emirati Arab, Bahrain, Kuwait, the Qatar, all of these countries put together. We can start big farming tomorrow, but the problem is we have not the access to the market. And there is a lack of environmental protection, lack of water catchment. We have got enough water. Unlike the Middle East country, we don't need to drink water from the sea. We have got fresh water annually, but we need to catch that water and produce more agricultural products. So I think that is the key problem, is the market, investment, more involvement in government. Because if government is not investing, is not encouraging investment, then the ordinary farmer don't have know-how, how to access to the international market and where they can get the technology, the research, and all the things. I really strongly think the Israeli model is the best thing that Africa can copy it. Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting perspective. Quite correct. The issue is complex. Infrastructure, climate change, innovation, research, the development of knowledge, accessing the right markets, accessing the right appropriate technologies, having policy that is supportive. It's a holistic solution that is required. I think it's a very relevant comment. Danielle?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond. I love the comment very much, actually. I think I mentioned very briefly the importance of government investing in infrastructure. I think the other thing you mentioned about this Israeli model, well, after we launched the case study, we actually launched it in Ghana with your Minister of Agriculture. The case study, we started to get inundated with requests from countries across Africa saying, can you help us implement that triangle model? So we've actually created a partnership with Grant and with Tony Blair Institute for Global Change to actually come together with African governments and look at that triangle model. What does it look like to translate it and adapt it to a local context? And I tell you why this is critical. Number one, because you need that investment in the knowledge, and this is the innovation ecosystem. We're empowering local actors. We're not coming in with a turnkey project and leaving. Someone said that. We're actually empowering the local stakeholders to do it themselves, adapted to the local context. But more than that, you're trying to attract foreign direct investment into your countries to invest in the agricultural sector. What you want is to help de-risk those investments. You do that by giving them confidence that your farmers and your agribusinesses can succeed because they have that support ecosystem. So we very much believe, number one, that introducing this golden triangle approach is not only critical investment in the capacity to innovate, but will actually help de-risk direct foreign investments. And just a word to our collaboration actually with Febbie too, the other area which we know Israel invested in. Does anyone met Yossi Vardi? Do you know who Yossi Vardi is? He's like the forefather of the startup nation. Is that the best way to describe him, Eran? Okay, he's like the forefather of the startup nation, right? He's advising government leaders around the world on how to do innovation. We asked him personally when we wrote this case study, what would you do if you were leading an African nation today? How do you invest in agricultural innovation? And he said, identify those leading agricultural entrepreneurs that are going to be that change no matter what, and just lift them up. They're the ones that you need to be providing the support with. And so we've actually also just collaborating with Febbie and the National Youth Council of Malawi, actually to bring to them the know-how from Israel to both invest from the top down with the governments, but bottom up too, and actually to give them capacity.
Quick question.
Yes.
Why did he say identify the leading agricultural entrepreneurs and not the leading farmers?
Because he believes in agribusiness.
So he's going to come to that. And I think that's a paradigm we need to deal with. The average Ghanaian farmer, for instance, and I say this very carefully because it can be taken very wrongly, but the average Ghanaian farmer is a smallholder, peasant, subsistence farmer. A number of them who have tried to go beyond what their natural strength can happen have faced catastrophe. Why? Because they stretch beyond what they are normally able to manage and maybe took on a loan to do some big farming and there's a fertilizer something and something happens and boom, they are in debt. So I have this clear feel that the future of agriculture is in young, educated people who don't want to do agriculture but want to make money. and they see agriculture as a means to make that money. And so we need to find these guys, all right? And we need to keep those nice farmers who farm for the love of farming and all that. But the future of agriculture is in these young, educated people who want to make money through agriculture. What governments can do is build roads to farms, from the farm to the market, all right? And make the triangle, at least these agronomists, available so these guys can tap into them, because it takes 30 years to, train that person. So if they are there, these guys are going to pick them up. Some of the most successful farms, there's a company called Golden Exotics in Ghana. They came to farm their fruits and to export, basically. And they have created these wild chains of private, smallholder, medium-sized, all kinds of farms and farm holdings, all right, to produce the fruits which they process and then they export. The reason why that's an important case study is that, of course, they came in with government knowledge and some support, but they have had to make their way every step of the way to create the science, to find the investment, to create the communities that will produce those things. It didn't take government to do it for them. And I believe if there was a government to help them, they would be happy to take it. But the entrepreneur must have a clear view from end to end, and then find the wherewithal to plug those things in. And if I had anything to do with it, I'll say, find those entrepreneurs and let's help them.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, let me come in.
Final comment from Febbie.
Okay, fine. The reason why we also dealing with agripreneurs is that you can train 10 people, and those 10 people are working in different areas. So we instruct those 10 people to teach their communities whatever they are getting from the trainings. And that's why there was also a comment about a train of trainers. These are responsible for training smallholder farmers in their surrounding areas. There are places you can reach. There are places you can't reach. But those people will be able to reach those places where you can't reach. And the other thing is, most of those people are elite. So it's easy to transfer information to them. It's easy to transfer knowledge to them. And they will dilute the knowledge, interpret it, and then give it to their communities. Thank you.
Wonderful. Good luck to you. Thank you so much to the panelists. I think some interesting conclusions, but the one very clear conclusion, the experience of Israel and the agricultural model that it has created has relevance within the region and beyond the region into Africa. And I think that when one talks about agricultural research, it's a win-win game for everyone. This is not a trade negotiation where there are winners and losers. Everybody wants their neighbor and their region to be food secure. So I think the transfer of knowledge through research and through collaboration, particularly when it comes to food, is a wonderful icebreaker for political context as well as that of food security. Thank you so much.